Yes.
It worked.
Yes. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar today. We're talking about proofs of concept and how they can help your governance, risk, and compliance strategy. My name is Emily Elizabeth. I work here at Onspring. We are a GRC software company. We specialize in automation and reporting and data visualization for anything related to improving your governance, risk, and compliance. And today I'm joined here by one of my favorites, John Aaholm here. So John is the GRC Technology Lead at American Family Insurance. He has been an Onspring customer 2 times over. He is known to us as one of the most technically savvy and creative individuals we know. He is creative, as in I just learned that he's a musician and a photographer. So if you guys need any help on the side, John's available for that. But his day job consists of process development, information security governance. He's got data modeling and analytics under his belt. He knows regulatory compliance and internal controls. He's great at strategic planning. There's not a whole lot that John has not done or is currently doing in his role. And John's been a guest speaker of ours several times now. Not only is he a great presenter, but he's also got a lot of information to share with everybody. So we asked him to come on board today to say, take us through how you sell ideas internally with American Family Insurance. Someone will come to you with an idea and say, we think we could automate this process, or we just have this problem and we don't know how to solve it. And John comes up with creative solutions on how to do it. But before you just implement something, you really need to put some logic and some parameters behind it to say, is this a good solution? Is it a good use of our time? And is it going to achieve what we want it to do? So all of those things, John is going to kind of take us through his examples of what he's doing at American Family Insurance. And we'll kind of go through there. So yes, for a few housekeeping items before John jumps into it and I run away. Yes, this is being recorded. Yes, you will receive a copy. No, there are no slides to share with you because they require talk tracks. So you're going to get the recording. If anybody has any questions at any point in time, you can either drop them into the chat, which is on the right-hand side of your screen, or you can drop them into the Q&A section, also on the right-hand side of your screen. So let's get started. That sound good, John?
Sounds good to me.
All right.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Emily. It's a very nice introduction, and I'm not sure that I have all the skills and background, but I try every day, and I try to continue to learn more. As Emily mentioned, I do work for American Family Insurance, and this is the second organization that I've worked at where I've been involved in the initial implementation of Onspring as a GRC platform, as well as ongoing additional like modules and new capabilities within the solution. At American Family, I reside within the information risk management area, but we do have solutions that are used by other areas outside of our organizational division, if you will. And we'll be talking about that a little bit as well. And right now we've got a small team that helps in supporting the Onspring platform. So we not only support the solutions that we've implemented for our division, but also we help with support for the other areas that are using it as we work to bring those groups up to speed on being able to do a little more self-management of their solutions. Okay, so if we move right into kind of the topic here, and as Emily mentioned, the reason that that we even talked about doing this type of presentation is at both organizations, I would frequently get questions, and be pre-COVID, it would be walking down the hall and, maybe someone had heard about Onspring or had seen some dashboards that were presented to them in, context of they didn't know too much about Onspring, but they saw some of the capabilities of how other parts of the organization were using it. And then they would just ask the questions like, okay, we have this, business need that we're trying to solve. Would Onspring be a good fit for that? Or, maybe they're looking to stop using an application, right? So kind of rationalization of applications so that we're consolidate a little bit more and, have ultimately like reduce the overall cost of IT through consolidation. So just wondering, could Onspring provide the same functionality and reporting as a tool that they're currently using, or, what are some additional capabilities that they might be able to see by moving to Onspring. So put together just kind of these as the primary steps that you would work through when you are looking at how do we validate whether this new business need or idea could be a fit for Onspring. So starting with the need, and that's just understanding what are the primary objectives, what are the primary outcomes that they're looking to accomplish associated with the way they've defined their business need. From a timing perspective, the whole point of doing these POCs is to not invest, or commit resources to doing the full implementation, right? A full system development lifecycle, like project timeline, but is there a way very quickly we can do some configuration and understand whether or not those primary business objectives could be met, with Onspring as a solution. And then, from a solution perspective, if we're working with an area that, we haven't been involved with at all, this is an opportunity to help them understand that, Onspring it's a flexible platform, right? It's a no-code solution, so it does provide a lot of agility in being able to react fairly quickly to, kind of changing business requirements. And I'll get into kind of scoping it and avoiding large scale changes. But the point is, Onspring is intended to be, a flexible solution where you can be agile. So it's an opportunity early on during the proof of concept to set the expectation and kind of partner with the individuals, with the stakeholders who have the business need, and show that you can be agile and you can be flexible and really focus and hone in on what are the primary drivers and needs that they're looking for. And then the last component of the POC is what's the expected outcome here? And the point is you want to define what those criteria are at the start, right? So you don't want this to turn into a proof of concept where you keep going back, you answer a couple of additional questions, and then they're like, well, what about this, and this? And then you go back and it just never ends. So setting an agreement on the front end of what does success look like, and then what are the criteria that they will be looking for to know whether or not those outcomes have been met. That way, it's again kind of time boxes it a little bit and will help identify what the actions are then to move into the next step. Okay. So early on, we had established a request prioritization methodology that was really intended to be, let's keep this as simple as possible, right? So we, when we look holistically at all of the work coming in for our team, we didn't want something that, required completing a lot of different attributes to, kind of very objectively come up with this is the prioritization score based on dozens of different attributes that you're looking for. We wanted to keep it simple as we were standing up the process for managing the Onspring platform, and then looking at introducing where we have governance oversight with it. So we just wanted to keep it simple. So we did build out a solution in Onspring to allow our users and prospective users as well to be able to submit requests. And the requests fall into these 5 types, right? So just granting access. Maybe someone needs a different permission or a different set of roles. from what they currently have because they changed jobs, or someone identified an issue or a bug, right? Managing data could be anything from like importing a new control listing that they have, or maybe there are some records that need to be cleaned up. And then the bottom two, change existing, would be an enhancement to an existing solution that's out there. And then the last one is someone has an idea for a new solution, right? So any of the requests that come in get categorized into one of those request types. So when those requests come in, we then look at two perspectives of this. We look at what's the development effort associated with this body of work. We're just using a 5-point scale. So some things, would be very quick, like just granting someone, a new role, making modification to a data, maybe deleting, some records that were incorrect. Might be less than an hour. But then the other ones we bucket, and we do use the SAFE methodology. So we do kind of track our work within the 6-week program increments, and then we have 2-week sprints. So we try to align the development effort estimate to our SAFE planning model. So those are the buckets that we look at just from a development effort when we first review the requests that came in. The other dimension we look at is business value. And again, there's nothing behind this that says, okay, if there are 27 processes that are in scope, it gets this value. These are just all right now they're subjective criteria, but we do have guiding principles associated with these. The bottom line is we look at the business value of a request is going to be higher, right? If it touches more business processes, or if those processes are more critical to the organization, they're more enterprise in nature. How many users are going to be impacted, right? So there might be a request that comes through. It may be a very simple and what appears to be a minor request, but this could benefit all of the senior leadership reporting capabilities on dashboards. Is there an ROI? As I mentioned, sometimes the requests that come through are, can Onspring replace application X? Well, then you want to look at it at an ROI, or are there some efficiency gains that can be identified and quantified if we would move this process into Onspring? What kind of risks are we mitigating? And then conversely, right, there might be risks that are introduced based on what the request is. So just understanding the risk component of that request. So it could be a risk to data, it could be a risk to access to data, might be a risk to change in a business process, et cetera. And then we also have like dating and reporting enhancements, right? Again, so those enhancements may not take a lot of work, but they might provide a whole lot of value to the organization or to the users who are executing a business process. And then finally, what's the reporting or the workflow organization span and visibility? Again, as I mentioned, something visible to senior leadership, or maybe it's critical for audit committee reporting, would have a higher business value, even though some of the other criteria might be lower. So that currently is how we look at the prioritization of the requests that come through. We look at development effort and then business value associated with that request. So when we look at what the requests that we've had coming into our group over the last roughly year and a half, this is how the distribution of where the requests fall. Right. So again, we're charting development effort against business value. And the key here is, we're trying to focus the limited resources that we have into the lower left quadrant or area of the graph, because we want to focus on the higher business value items that take, less effort to complete. So when we actually look at and dig into the numbers, so 65 of the requests that came through do fall into moderate or higher business value, and then up to a moderate level of development effort. And then if we expand that out one more, column and row, we get to 91%, right? So that's what we'd expect in terms of where the request would fall. So what does that ultimately mean then when we're looking at proof allocating resources and prioritizing, proof of concept work that comes in. So when we look at the considerations, again, by the request type, by the 5 different requests that we have, it's the bottom to change an existing solution or implement a new solution that lend themselves to performing some sort of proof of concept. So still staying with the data, right? So now when we look at the roughly, at the time, 622 requests that have come in, we can see the distribution across the different request types. And we do have an other as well. I didn't talk about that, but not many things fall in there. And then obviously the bubble chart there just shows the number of requests for that particular area. Priority rating is simply looking at, it's a combination, if you will, of the development effort and then the business value. So that's the distribution of the requests that have come in. So then when we look again at hone in on these proof of concept candidates, we only wanted to focus on those, the requests where priority was going to be, moderate or above. Because again, that means that the development effort is associated with it is going to be higher, but we also have a higher business value. So within those 2 areas, again, 6% of the new solution requests that have come in, would kind of fit within what we defined as loosely as the criteria for performing a proof of concept, and then 39% for changing the existing. And then when we get into the examples, I'll go into a little more detail of, okay, what exactly does that mean? And, when would we do a proof of concept for changing an existing solution versus just starting with the team, right? Because we already have the solution and then making the enhancements that they're requesting. So I will cover that coming up in a couple of slides. So the considerations by request type then. So when we look at someone requesting a new solution, right? So the first kind of question or consideration we look at is, does it really fit into Onspring's base solutions that are there? Onspring is a GRC like platform the way it's marketed, but as all of us who have been administering Onspring know, especially if you apply any creativity with it, it's a process enablement platform. Right. So if there's a process that is defined where there are steps associated with it, there's information tied to it, some actions, that take place with it, and there's some sort of reporting, it doesn't need to fit within the normal definitions of GRC, kind of like information and processes. It's something that you could build out. In my last organization, we built out a governance solution, right? And that was just from scratch. Because there wasn't anything in like Onspring's base solutions that aligned with what we needed. But what we needed was something to look holistically across the organization and have an understanding of where do we have like governance committees, and when do we have executive committees and steering committees and management committees, and what do those committees provide like oversight and governance to, right? So we are able to identify like business processes that a particular steering committee had coverage over, and then we could say who's on that committee, right? What risks might they be mitigating or accepting? So there's a lot of things again that really fit into it. So that in and of itself is kind of like a parent of like GRC concepts, if you will. So it totally fit within like Onspring's base solutions, even though there wasn't a base solution there. You might get other requests that come through where it really isn't, a good fit. Well, Onspring has, like in, asset repository, if your IT department already has a CMDB solution, right? You don't want to like replicate that or necessarily replace it. It's like there's already a solution in place to do that. So anyway, that's the first one. Just does it fit within the base solution? Next question would be, does the process or the data align to existing Onspring solutions, right? So, and when we get into the examples, we've got examples where it tied to things that we currently have already deployed within Onspring, but then also like we recently did a proof of concept where it was completely standalone, and we have another request that it would also be standalone, aside from using like the users, which in Onspring for us it's auto-populated via an API from our HR system. Again, could we replace existing applications? And if that's the case, then you'd want to understand a little more of what's the current functionality that they have in that solution. Like, what do they have in place for security, what kind of data, et cetera. So if it would be a custom solution, right, so there isn't a Onspring-based solution that exists already, does it fit within the current processes and the data, right? So again, if it's going to be totally custom and doesn't really fit within what you're currently managing in Onspring, you may or may not do it, right? It's just another consideration point. Does data need to be imported or integrated? And if the answer is yes, you probably want to include at least a portion of that in your proof of concept, just to know like how different or how much data normalization you'll need to go through if it does move into the implementation state. You certainly don't want to spend a ton of time on completely analyzing the data, but if you can at least get a small subset of it, maybe spend a couple hours on it, it might be worthwhile and certainly help inform the results of the proof of concept. What's needed for workflow and reporting, right? Is there an impact to the security model, or is what they're asking for something where it already fits in the existing groups and roles the way they have them defined? Implementation change management impact, right? So if this does move forward into implementation, what are some of the obstacles or barriers that you might hit associated with that? What would the change management plan be, especially if you're moving away from, or you are replacing an existing application and then moving to Onspring? And then obviously, will the proof of concept answer the go or no go question when you get to the end of it, right? And if not, then you need to review the questions or the criteria, or just make sure that what you're focusing on during that proof of concept is going to provide the information for the stakeholders to make that determination of, yes, do we move forward with Onspring, or do they look for a different solution? And then what are the licensing implications? So it depends on, again, how your organization is licensed, but if there are new users that might need to be added, there might be a licensing implication associated with that. And then what are the future support implications? As I mentioned, right now, our small team is providing support for some of these other areas where we've deployed solutions to enable their processes, and we're still in the process of refining how to get those individuals up to speed and have the appropriate level of permissions to be able to support their solution without impacting those shared elements that might impact how other groups are using Onspring. So those are the considerations if it's a new solution, if we're changing existing. So two additional things to look at would be, is re-architecting the existing solution going to be needed? And or is it an opportunity to revisit the Onspring-based solution for that solution? So there are a couple of solutions that we have implemented that the team early on really wanted to make a lot of changes, right? So it's kind of like they didn't want to stick to some of the more simplistic and straightforward workflows or configurations that were included in the Onspring base configuration of that solution. But they're like, well, can we add these additional fields? And in some cases, adding fields is no big deal. In other cases, you can certainly make a solution much more complicated than maybe it needs to be. And so what we're finding with, again, a couple of these solutions is we're now taking a step back. Now they've been using the solutions for a while and actually re-demoing what the Onspring solution, what that solution looked like as a base configuration. And it's kind of like, okay, now there's some things that, again, we added complexity. Is all that complexity really adding value, or is it just making it more difficult to administer the solution and adding confusion for end users as they're trying to use the solution to execute their business processes? So the first example we have is enterprise risk management and risk metrics. So what they identified as their need was looking to reduce costs because they were using a different GRC solution for enterprise risks and the risk metrics. So the time for this proof of concept was 6 weeks, and we did it with our internal Onspring resources. And the solution was consisted of the Onspring base risk management solution, and then we built a custom metrics solution, and that was modeled exactly on what they had with their previous GRC solution, because that was their question up front. They're like, we really like the way the metrics solution works today. Can we do the same thing in Onspring? And so again, that's a question that comes up frequently. Can we have the same thing? And one of the things that I'm learning is to push back a little bit more on just providing what they have currently, or at least maybe do that just so that they can see it can be done, but then make sure the conversation does go toward how to leverage the strengths that Onspring has as a solution and configurations to make using and administering Onspring easier, while still maybe meeting what their business requirements are. So anyway, that's what the solution was. The outcome from this POC was we got to go. They actually liked the solution. It did provide some, actually a lot of reporting enhancements over what they previously had. The prior solution that they actually had to go back to the vendor whenever they wanted to make reporting changes. So they really liked the flexibility of the dashboards and the reports in Onspring. Next example is environmental, social, and governance. So the need here was to improve the efficiency of how the ESG data was being collected and reported on, right? So a lot of organizations are working on this. This was an 8-week proof of concept with internal resources again. And we started with the Onspring base ESG solution and a limited set of the ESG data that we as an organization have reported. The outcome from this, so it's currently on hold, and it's been on hold for almost a year. So we demoed, again, how the base ESG solution would work using some of our AmFam data. And they liked that part of it, but then they had a whole nother set of requirements and additional questions that will take more time and we'll definitely need to extend out the solution and probably introduce another few applications to be able to meet those additional data needs. So right now it's on hold. They were looking at some alternative solutions. I don't think they've made any progress, but we also just haven't had the bandwidth to circle back and try and pick this work up. The third example that we have is rule and underwriting manual management. So this is an example of a primarily standalone solution. And what the team was looking for was a way to gain efficiency and governance for managing rule and underwriting manuals. So currently, it's pretty much a manual process for them to look at what are all the underwriting rules associated with each state. And then there are different Word documents where they can copy and paste information in, a lot of work to kind of do version management associated with each of those. So that's what they're looking for. It's basically a document management type solution. This was also a 6-week engagement, but for this, we did not have the capacity internally to pick up this work. So Onspring sales support and the technical team picked up actually doing the proof of concept development work. So we had captured some of the requirements and some of the reporting expectations that they had, turned that over to the Onspring team. The Onspring then built out the solution. It was based on the contract and document management base solution that Onspring has already. But again, there are a lot of enhancements that were made associated with that. So for this one, we're still pending. The the group that made the request, the division that they're in, a different team was already looking at like a different document management solution to address some other needs that they had. So they are currently in a proof of concept with that other solution to see, again, if that whole division can adopt that platform, or if it looks like we might move forward with Onspring for this particular need that came through. And then the final example here is application security controls. So for this, it was a short-term reporting need while the asset and control programs are matured. So essentially, we're still working on building the integration between our CMDB list of business applications and the application portfolio listing and Onspring, right, to be able to bring that information in. But what the teams were looking for was a fairly easy way to just understand what security controls have been applied to each of the applications. So they identified a list of roughly 10 critical application security controls, and then they just wanted to be able to know, has this been implemented? If it hasn't been implemented, when will it be implemented? So it's kind of a project management and tracking solution, as well as asset and control reporting associated with it. This was fairly quick, 2 weeks, and it was the solution itself. And again, this was with internal resources. So we built out custom security controls solutions that tied to the asset and the control applications. But again, knowing this was a short-term need until we have this other data populated, it was easier just to do it as a standalone solution. Outcome, this one is also on hold, as we are the primary barrier we hit from being able to move forward was simply that the sets of data that we were looking at, so the assets that are currently in Onspring, are at a different level than this other source that the team had been working on. So there's some normalization work that needs to take place between the systems, but then there are some other activities underway to improve the maturity of the application portfolio management data that we have. So we just put this on hold until some of those programmatic and data correction, data maturity items can be taken care of. Okay, so the process that we work through for our proof of concept work starts with the idea and considerations, right? So clarifying the business need, what are the primary use cases that they're looking for, define the outcomes that are needed for the decision, right? So I mentioned that early on. You need to know what are the key criteria that they're looking at, or that they need to see to be able to make a decision. And is it a base solution? Does a base solution exist, right? And if it does, we've got a trial instance with Onspring where the base solutions are there. If it's a custom development, then we would stand that up in our development instance. Is it standalone, or will it be integrated with existing Onspring applications? Again, from a planning standpoint, need to be aware of that early on, because what this new group may have for how they categorize controls might be different than the controls that are already in Onspring. So it's just starting to understand what the implications of tying it to other data in other applications that already exist, what that might be on implementing the solution and doing the proof of concept. What expectations exist for who's going to be using it, security, reporting, and workflow. And then develop and configure and demo the basic functionality, dashboards, reports, and data, and then iterate to answer questions and prepare outcome results. And again, I mentioned you want to set the expectation that this isn't going to be, every 2 weeks you return, you show something new, and then they ask for a whole bunch of other things. It should all be with the aim of meeting whatever the outcomes are that are needed to arrive at a decision to know if Onspring is going to be a good fit. And then you could, again, start planning for an actual implementation. So the outcomes that we primarily focus on, is it a good match as far as functionality goes? What is the impact on cost, right? So if you've got existing users, just adding new applications to those users, there's not going to be a cost increase associated with that. But if you have a total new set of users, or if you need to hire consultants or additional support, there might be a cost associated with it. What are the scope and the resources needed to implement the solution? Again, what does change management look like? How is it going to be supported ongoing after it goes live? And then what risks and blockers were identified as part of the proof of concept, right? Because that is going to inform your project timeline and how you scope out the actual solution if it moves to implementation. And then we do move into implementation as the last step. And then this is just the really basic system development lifecycle that we kind of follow from a basic template perspective. Obviously, things may change a little bit, but it's, now we would be refining the requirements that we captured during the proof of concept, move into a detailed design, configure, build, and demo that solution. After we've done that and we've pretty much landed on, okay, this is what we want the solution to look like. Then we start building the user guide and the documentation, because that's what our solution owners and stakeholders would then reference as they're doing their testing. So then we first have testing done by the solution owners, then by doing a pilot with other stakeholders, if that's going to be appropriate. Any final configuration based on feedback from testing, and then we have the go live training and change management associated with it. So within the environment, so I did mention kind of the trial environment and the development environment, and this slide just kind of shows how we use our different environments. So as I mentioned, we do have a trial instance right now, and that's really helpful for us to be able to just go back and look at what are the base Onspring solutions, and applications. Onspring is obviously, continuing to enhance their base solutions. And it was after we started our project, I know that there was an effort done by Onspring resources to try and, I think, clean up or standardize and simplify the dashboards. So what we have in our development environment, right, that was created when that was stood up, those base dashboards are different than what's in the base Onspring solutions now. So it's very helpful for us to be able to go back into that trial instance and look at the revised dashboards since our development environment was created. And obviously, this is isolated from other instances. So if you are looking at part of the POC of trying to tie this to your existing controls or existing regulations, risks, whatever, again, just recognize you're not going to have those connections there unless you would import some of the data. And then in our development environment, so this is where if we don't have the base configurations, we can reach out to Onspring and they can package that base configuration into our development environment as a starting point. So this is primarily then where we would execute our POC and then also do the development for the implementation if we're not using the trial instance. And then again, a benefit here is having the existing Onspring solutions and demo and test data to a limited extent as well in the development environment. As we move into test, we are then packaging from the development environment, and then we just have notes in our configuration steps for packaging to simple things like make sure you're updating your messaging and workflow group notifications to remove dev, but now add tests so that we know where those notifications are coming from. We also then, as we move through the SDLC and we move into testing, we're making changes, unless it's something significant, we're making those changes in the test environment, and allows us to be a little more agile and responsive to those requests rather than always going back to development and then promoting those changes up into the test environment. So we do configure the changes there. And then this is also where we build out the user guide and start developing dashboards. And then in production, so packaged from the test environment, Also, again, updating messaging workflow notification. We publish the user guides, and then we would refresh the development instance from production, so that our lower instance now, again, as we start any new development enhancements or work within this solution, it's going to be based on what had been deployed to production. And sorry, I misspoke on this. In the test environment, the user guide dashboard development. So we actually did start putting all of our user guides, rather than having like standalone Word documents or separate documents like on SharePoint or on a different website. We just built those out as dashboards, so that the user can stay in Onspring, and then we have it tied to our welcome to Onspring dashboard. So when people go to that, they have access to the standard Onspring generated content, like the videos, and standard help information that they have for the out-of-the-box solutions. But then in that same dashboard, they can see the list of American Family specific dashboards that are related to the solutions that we've deployed. And then it also shows like which roles are applicable for those user guides. So the advice for starting your POC program. So again, incorporate the POC work in prioritization and resource planning, and leverage Onspring sales support, if it's going to be appropriate. If you don't have the capacity with internal resources, or you might not have the knowledge on the specific requests that came through, and someone on the Onspring sales staff, might be more informed on exactly how that technically how that solution works. So they might be able to do it more rapidly than you could do it internally. So I did include the asterisk there, pointing to the bottom. So we are slowly piloting SAFE's prioritization model, which is called WSJF. And that stands for, I always forget what it stands for, weighted shortest job first. And because one of the things that we noticed is that SAFE WSJF prioritization model takes into consideration or account the cost of delay, right? So what's the cost of not allocating resources to look at, maybe bringing this new process or this new program into Onspring. So again, we haven't made a whole lot of progress on this yet, but it is something that we want to do. And also we're working to stand up a little more formalized governance. So tied to that, we do want to make sure that, again, we've got a consistent way of prioritizing the POC work along with all the other type of requests that are coming in that we're working on. As I mentioned, define the success criteria at the onset, early on in the POC. Parking lot, any non-essential requirements, and try and avoid scope creep as much as possible. And I know that is a bullet that's easier said than done. But again, if you can define and really hone in on what are the priority items, what's at the core of what they're trying to solve, focus on that, be able to get that implemented, or at least show them how that would work. And then when you get to implementation, you can then look at, okay, these are the items that we had parking lotted during the POC. Now let's talk about what that might look like as part of the implementation, or maybe it's a phase 2 associated with it. Make sure you do incorporate risks, barriers, costs, and future support requirements in the decision, as I mentioned previously. And then, probably most importantly, use the POC work to jumpstart the implementation, right? So if you've done the POC correctly, and unless the requirements have totally changed once you got to the end of it, you've already done, a fair bit of the work. So you can start with that and then continue to add to it as you learn more and you dig into some of the areas that you did not focus on during the POC itself. And with that, it brings us to the end. So Emily.
We're here. We're back. That was great, John. So as I was listening to you talk, 2 things came to mind. One, there's probably 2 different audience types every time you're considering a proof of concept. You are either on the audience type that is requesting, I want a proof of concept. I want to do this with Onspring. I want to make this easier, faster, better. Or you're on the other side and you're the technical resource, like John in this example, and he is there to advise how to deliver on it. And I want to call that out because depending on which audience type you fall in, you should think about things a little bit differently. If you have the idea and you're looking for John, the technical resource, to really make it work for you, make sure you are communicating, here's what my end goal is. This is what success looks like. If we make this happen, this is a win. Like, make sure you communicate that explicitly. And if you're on the technical side, your job is to figure out what is the smartest, most efficient way to build that particular proof of concept. And John and I have actually kind of talked behind the scenes behind this, where you'll have your audience number one requesting the proof of concept saying, hey, I want it to do this, this, and this. And John, with his expertise and his background, will say, yes, we can definitely do that. But that is probably not the smartest way to build it, because you're going to run into problems A, B, and C. So don't be afraid to push back with recommendations on the smartest way to build something, because what's going to happen is you're going to end up launching something and they're going to come back and say, well, this isn't quite what I wanted. So could you fix it? So it's going to come back. So from both sides, be vocal about what you want, what you expect it to do, and be vocal about the smartest way to build it. So treat each other like clients. Like, here's what I'm trying to advise you on the best way to do this, and I'm trying to advise you on how we can make this work for the company. So I want to call that out because I think that's important. One other thing that I think is probably important to mention is ROI and the value you're delivering back to your organization with this. So John, I don't know if you're doing this right now, but are you keeping a log of how much time you've saved, how much money you've saved for AmFam based on each one of these POCs that end up in an implemented phase?
So we have not. And as part of the initial business case that was presented to bring Onspring into the organization, right, there was an ROI component associated with it. And I did do some work. It was kind of after about a year after we had implemented a number of solutions, right? And I did go back to that business case, but we haven't done it for any of the POCs yet. But that is certainly something that we know we're going to get asked more for. And our structure does allow us, at least from what we're doing with like our Onspring team and time that we're spending in support and in development of some of these solutions, we have that data, but we haven't gone to that next step to say, okay, if the primary driver for this particular need is process or efficiency gains, right? Because we can eliminate manually updating all of these Word documents, generating PDFs, monitoring, changes to regulations, because we can create some triggers and we can use dynamic documents in Onspring to be able to create it. That's something where I think we can start quantifying those. And I think we can do a better job, again, as we move from the POC to actually implementation, going back and reviewing, okay, if ROI was discussed as part of the POC, let's make sure that we are tracking it. We have done it, or other teams have done it, for those instances where we have replaced existing applications, right? And that we definitely kind of showed as a positive, because it's lower annual IT costs for licensing, because we were able to show that the cost of having it in Onspring was lower than what they were paying for that other solution.
Yeah, that's great. So those of you guys listening in the audience, I would think about incorporating that into your own programs as you implement these in your organization, so that you have a baseline measurement of what it takes for you to execute this particular program, process, report, whatever it may be. What is the time commitment? What is the dollar commitment? And after you implement something, how do those baseline metrics change so that you can start building your own metrics to show the value that your particular team or department is delivering back to the business? It always helps when you're trying to advocate for something new or another resource or whatever it may be. So just starting to kind of track those metrics is always a good way to go. So, okay, John, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. For everybody still here, we are available if you guys want to kick around some ideas on what might make the most sense. What idea do you have that could come to life as a proof of concept, and you want to see what it might look like inside Onspring, what it would take to automate it, what kind of reports you could build? Send me a note. My email address is emily.elizabeth@onspring.com. I'm always available to talk. So shoot me a note and we can get a conversation going. But in the meantime, good luck with your own programs. And John, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.